the meeting on Scout Nebraska. The meeting on Scout Nebraska. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Dylan Mangel with Nebraska Extension, and I'm here with Tamara Jackson-Zims and Talon Mues, and we are Talon's out in the field today preparing to show us some Western bean cutworm. So the official live stream is going to start at 11 a.m., but welcome to everyone who's here now.
All right. Thanks, Dylan, for doing a quick little introduction there. Just seeing if kind of testing out some new different ways that we can do this live stream. So we're kind of on Zoom today, going live to YouTube. We're going to see, and we're trying this out because we're going to do a big event later on this year. Dylan, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that event that we're doing later this year.
Yeah, so later this year, we're going to be hosting sort of a half-day event where we're going to be going live from all across the state. So we'll be in different kinds of fields, diversity of crops, talking about diversity of problems we're seeing and what's actually happening in those fields now. And that's why we're doing this live, so we can give up-to-date information.
Yeah, definitely. And I am getting a little bit of feedback on my version here now, here on Zoom. I don't know. That could just be me out in the middle of a cornfield, though. So I am actually sitting on the ground here. I'm kind of on the edge of an irrigation system. So this is a road that they use to put out pipe. They've got some poly pipe over there laying on the ground, getting ready to fill up for here, getting close to tassel and critical water periods. But we did get some pretty good rains last night. I think here we probably got about half an inch. I saw some places maybe even got 2 inches over there by Gothenburg. You never know how accurate a phone weather station is, but so we got a decent rain last night. I think their kind of Kearney area maybe only got about 30 hundredths or something like that, but glad to see a little bit. That's definitely helpful during the hot weather we've had.
All right, well, it looks like it's 11 o'clock. Let's start the official live stream. So welcome to everyone who's joining in on the Scout Nebraska live stream today as we go into the 4th of July holiday weekend. This is a weekly live stream that we do here at Nebraska Extension, and our goal is to do it from the field where problems are occurring and talk about management of those issues and how to move forward. And that's why we're doing it live, because management has to occur quickly after we see these issues. Today in the live stream, we've got Tamara Jackson-Zims here, the University of Nebraska corn pathologist. I'm Dylan Mangel, the soybean pathologist at the University of Nebraska. And we have Talon Mues out in the field in front of a Western bean cutworm moth trap that he set up yesterday. And Talon is the county educator for which counties are you in, Talon?
I am in Dawson, Buffalo, and Custer. And so I used to cover Hall, but I moved up to Custer here just this year. And yeah, so today I am actually out in that cornfield that is just northwest of Overton. And I set up this Western bean cutworm trap, this green bucket trap that you can see right behind me. Hopefully I'm pointing at it there. That is only the top half of it because I have all of these moths piled up right next to me. And we caught all of these moths just in a little bit over a day, like a day and like 3 hours, which is pretty crazy because it is pretty early in July. We're expecting that moth flight had started here recently, but with those warm temperatures and all of that we got here early this spring, that's really expedited that moth flight. And we actually have seen even laid eggs so far. I got pictures of laid eggs this past week. And really we're seeing really quick increases in moth flights. And so this is what we caught here in one day, and I'll flip my screen so that everybody can kind of see that. So here's the corn. And then this here is my collection of moths. And so hopefully you can all see this. Well, my shadow's probably right in the way. But this is a pile of moths that I found. Now, those are pretty nondescript moths. That is because we had some rain last night. And so that rain filtered into that bucket with these moths that flew in, and kind of rubbed off on those scales. And so I do have small little piles of moths all over the place over here as I was counting them. I count them in groups of 10, mainly because 10 is a pretty even number. You can multiply it by however many piles you have, and you get a nice, pretty round number. So I would say that so far this morning, I counted probably 50 piles so far, and I got about halfway through the bucket. So in just one night, I was able to catch probably about 1,000 moths, which is actually pretty crazy. That's a very large number for just a single day, um, especially this early. So we know that those moths are flying. You can check where these moths, these different moth flights and green bucket traps are using the UNL extension moth flight resources. There is a Great Lakes Maritime service that actually has weather stations up all over across the state and even other states, I believe, that actively update moth flight counts. And so here in Nebraska, we do a really good job of getting kind of all of kind of south and central and even eastern Nebraska with our flights. I know we have some up in northeast as well. The educator up there is Wayne Onesorg, and I believe he does some counts as well, which is really helpful because we want to know when that peak moth flight is. Usually that peak moth flight usually lands around probably tassel time, as tassel tissue is really important for those Western bean cutworm larvae. So that is going to be one critical thing that I do want to talk about. But first, not all of the moths that I did catch are as washed off. So moths have scales. And hopefully you can see this moth that I have. It's got kind of brown edges on its wings. And then it's got very kind of unique dots on the side of it. So right there, hopefully you can see it. Maybe not. There are two kind of brown dots on the black part of its wing. That's kind of a diagnostic key for identifying Western bean cutworm moths. And so otherwise, a lot of these had their scales washed off because of the rain that occurred. We do have a couple in there that still have their scales, but for the most part, they kind of got washed off. Now, these traps do occasionally catch other moths, but what's unique about these traps is that it's a green bucket trap that uses a pheromone. So this is the top half of the bucket, and right in here is a pheromone Western bean cutworm lure that attracts the Western bean cutworms in the field to this green bucket trap. They fly in here, and then at the bottom of this green bucket, I'll put that wire mesh kind of at the bottom of it. So, and then down here, hopefully you can kind of see there is a red strip that's kind of covered in scales. That is I guess I call it a kill strip. It's a pesticide strip that releases a chemical that will then kill the moths and they die and fall into the bucket. So I use the wire mesh to keep most of those moths off the ground because like yesterday, when we get lots of water in that bucket, they'll just degrade. And so one of the benefits of coming and counting it the night after is that they haven't fully degraded and like rotted in the bucket, which is actually really nasty to count. And as a plant pathologist, I'm not used to counting dead, mushy bugs. I prefer my fungi and bacteria. But so big things when it comes to Western bean cutworm is that it will be laid on the top. Those eggs will get laid from these moths in the top third of the plant. And so we're going to go do some scouting. But I want everybody to know that just because we're getting a lot of moths in this trap, it doesn't mean that there's a lot of eggs out in the field. We have not been able to necessarily correlate the amount of bugs in a green bucket trap to the amount of eggs out in a field. What it does tell you is when that peak flight is occurring, and we can assume during that peak flight, we're going to have the most eggs laid. And so normally that peak flight usually ends up mid-July, maybe late July, depending on where you are in the state. They're occurring right around tassel because like I said, that tassel tissue is really important. And so I'm walking through the cornfield now. It's about chest high here. I'm sure you can see that. And when scouting for Western bean cutworm, we usually recommend scouting at least 50 plants. And so when we scout those 50 plants, you probably want to do it in multiple parts of a field, especially if you're scouting a very large field. And so I'm not going to go too far in to this field here. I am on the south side. That's important for where the trap gets put. You want that trap on the south side of the field because we have kind of a general southern wind here in the state. And so we want that pheromone to go into the field and lure them back to the trap. If you put it on the north side of the field, a lot of that pheromone may be pushed away from that trap, which is not ideal. So when I'm scouting for Western bean cutworm here, I'm going to flip my camera around. This is our first plant here that I've selected. You want to look at the tops of the leaves of the top third, because you're not going to find Western bean cutworm on the bottom side of the plant or the bottom side of the leaf, and you're going to find it probably a third of the way up. So scouting these leaves, and you're going to do that for about 50 plants. And so I did scout earlier walking through this field, and I did not find any eggs. I think finding eggs this time of year is not going to be as high right now. I think we'll start seeing a lot more here in a week or so. As you can see, we're starting to get a lot of moth flights. And so we've got some other things going on. We've got maybe some hulkus spot in on some of these leaves, but for the most part, we're probably not going to be seeing a whole lot for egg masses, I don't think, today. So are there any questions in the chat about how to identify Western bean cutworm moths or larvae?
So Talon, I'm curious, when you're looking for those eggs, when you said now is not a great time, when are we likely to see them more?
So I would say we're likely to see them, our growth stage right now, kind of find where that bottom node is, so sixth node. So we're probably around V12, 13 here. We're still probably a couple leaves away from getting to tassel. I would expect they're right before tassel and maybe right during tassel is when you're going to find the most larvae and most egg masses. And that's simply because if the moths lay their eggs before there's a tassel, those larvae are much less likely to survive. And so Julie Peterson used to work there at the West Central Research Extension and Education Center. And she did some pretty cool research on larvae viability for Western bean cutworm, depending on when eggs got laid. And if there was no available tassel tissue to feed on for those larvae, they actually decreased in viability quite a bit, which was kind of cool to see. They will and can feed on leaf and even silk tissue, but it's not like their preferred form of nutrition, those larvae. And then they work their way down into the ear. And so if you are finding egg masses this time of year without a tassel, it's not a huge deal because they're most likely not going to survive in that cornfield and make it down to the ear where they're actually going to cause significant yield loss. And so that's one of the critical things that happens when we're thinking about kind of almost like the optimal conditions. That host crop needs to be in a good in the right growth stage to really contribute to probably high levels of yield loss, because if there's no tassel, there's not going to be as many larvae that are surviving to then move down into the ear, where it can cause direct yield loss from eating kernels, indirect yield loss from secondary infections, from ear rots, and those kinds of things. Grain molds later on can occur after secondary infections, all of those kinds of things. And so I did not find any egg masses, so that is a good sign. The normal threshold for making management decisions when it comes to Western bean cutworm in field corn, because it is very different if you're growing different types of corn. I mean, popcorn, seed corn, all of those kinds of things are going to have much lower thresholds. For field corn, we usually recommend making an application around 5 to 8% of the plants that you scout have egg masses present there during tassel. That's going to kind of be your trigger for making an application, depending on how much kind of risk you're allowing yourself there for the growing season. So, yeah. Were there any questions in the chat?
We had one question about general management, but I'm curious too, is management for this something that you could go out there and apply with a fungicide as well? Would growers often time those together?
Yes. So I think the most common practice for insecticides is for them to be applied with a fungicide, kind of grouping those up. They're at tassel. It's shown to be the most effective time for Western bean cutworm control and is a very effective timing for just about all foliar diseases as well. That growth stage of switching from vegetative to reproductive stages, that crop kind of relaxes on its self-defense kind of immune system almost to really get to work on filling that ear of the corn. And so that is a time that you really want to protect that and through grain fill. And usually that tassel time really is the most beneficial for both fungicides and insecticides. So they kind of get grouped together pretty commonly there together.
So, Talon, while you're out there, I'm curious, what are you seeing otherwise in the corn? I think you mentioned Holcus spot. Are you seeing anything else out there?
Yes. When I was walking through the field earlier, I did see some Goss's wilts on the lower canopy. So this area had some really heavy winds and maybe some potential hail. I'm not specifically sure for this specific field if they saw some hail. So it's kind of on the lower canopy. The tops of the canopy are really actually looking really pretty healthy here, which is good to see. But down here where we get a little bit more humid in the bottom of the canopy, we'll start to see more kind of fungal diseases, potentially some bacterial diseases. Let's see if we can find something here. So this here has kind of been a big talk recently. Let's see if I can hold it up to the light here. I'm hoping everybody can see that. Maybe not.
We can see it.
Good. And so this right here is
Hold it still.
Physoderma brown spot. Tamara, do you want to talk a little bit about Physoderma brown spot? I know you got a lot of questions about this here in the last week.
I would, thank you. And we can see that really well. And I hope what people are noticing is that it looks like two different things on here. You see some dark spots in that midrib, but then there's some yellow flecks, very tiny lesions on the leaf blade. They may be tan to yellow and in the center especially. So this is caused by a fungus. This is Physoderma brown spot. This is not southern rust. And, a lot of people see these yellow to orange or tan lesions on the blade, and it's pretty alarming because it kind of looks like southern rust. And so this is actually another fungus. It does like very wet conditions, so it often infects when there's been water in the whorl. And because it infects at intervals through over time, you often see these symptoms in banding patterns across the leaf. And so if you see real dark spots with yellow lesions on the blade, dark spots in the midrib, it's going to be Physoderma, and I would not spray that. It won't help you at this point. Thank you.
Yeah. No, definitely. We'll keep searching here. And so I feel like I do a lot of talking in cornfields because I usually let Dylan do all the soybeans, but maybe there is a soybean here close. I'm going to point out one more thing. So there's a lot of, oh, it just flew away. But the one thing that I want to bring to your attention, tar spot has been found very commonly, or has been found much more recently here in cornfields across Nebraska. Just remember that not all black spots are tar spots. There's a lot of dirt out on leaves. There's a lot of insect frass, and all of that can contribute to misdiagnosis when you don't need to make any application because you don't actually have the disease. So that is one big thing. One big concern is that we may jump the gun with some of those diagnoses. And so I would really recommend the Crop Protection Network's lookout tool to see if tar spot's active in your region. That's from the Crop Protection Network. And they do a really great job with a handful of diseases. And Tamara, you were talking the other day that you were really liking the disease forecasting tool. Do you want to talk about that maybe a little bit?
Sure. I like both. I love the crop lookout tool. People can actually report what they're seeing, attach two pictures, and it goes to experts in that state on that crop. And so, for example, I might get the corn disease ones, Dylan would get the soybean disease ones and approve that. So for a quick ID, that's really great. And then it lets other people around you know what's in the area. But I'm loving this crop risk tool, which is actually filled with disease forecasting models. And what you do is you can pin locations. And for me now, I've got over a dozen locations across Nebraska pinned on mine. And I'm watching them daily to see what the forecast says for tar spot especially, but many other diseases. There's even for white mold and soybean. And if you watch that model on a daily basis, you'll see that it can change as the weather conditions, for instance, have changed. And so this one's going to be really useful to us. And just keep in mind for folks like, especially in Nebraska, they can't account for conditions that are different under irrigation pivots, but it gives you what the overall weather forecast, what the weather conditions are and how that might impact disease. So this is a great tool. If you want to learn more about it, let us know. Right now, Dylan has switched over and is showing you how to navigate through that tool. And maybe we can do a more focused one in the near future. I can do that for you. But there's a lot of really great information here, and it will surprise you. There's examples in northern Nebraska right now where we've been at high risk for a number of days for tar spot development, but not so much now in the southeast part of the state where it's been a lot hotter. And that's an indication of how important temperature is on this disease.
Yeah, I would definitely say this week was not super optimal temperature wise for tar spot, but maybe last week when it was pretty consistently down into the 60s and 70s overnight and during the day. I would say that those were pretty good conditions for tar spot development. And then as we heat up, maybe here in July, do you think tar spot's going to just slow down a little bit, Tamara? Do you what do you kind of foresee in the future? Do you know?
That's what I would anticipate. And, that'll vary depending on where you're at. But generally, temperatures that get over about 73 degrees start to slow down disease. And so you really see little to no change in locations where you've started hitting 90 degrees and above. And so that could be really important. Me up here in northern Nebraska, especially, our night temperatures are still getting down into the 60s. And you'll see a flush of disease, I think, of tar spot over the next few days as we see the consequences of that.
Yeah. And so one of the cool things that me, Tamara, and Dylan are going to be working towards a program in Kearney on July 24th. We're going to be talking about all of these things again, what happened in maybe the past 2 weeks, what's going to happen here during grain fill, and we're even going to have a specialist, Eric Hunt, who does education specifically on meteorology and weather conditions and what's optimal. And we've been working with Eric a lot recently, dealing with tar spot and southern rust in the past couple of years, and all of those things to help kind of get those disease conditions down and let people know when these diseases are really having a good time and really developing. So, all right, Dylan, it's your turn. We're out. We made it to the beans. We made it to the beans. So the first thing that I see when I walked out here is I did see some Japanese beetles. There is a little bit of defoliation going on, but not much right now. You need quite a bit of defoliation on soybeans for it to really matter. But
Yeah, I think that number is 30%.
30%?
I recall. I was just looking it up because we had some, and I think
Yep.
just like disease, 30%, 5% looks a lot worse than it really is. So 30% is a lot of leaf.
Yep. Yep.
Talon, remind us again where you're scouting today.
So this is just north of Overton. So kind of central Nebraska and just north of the interstate, kind of west of Kearney, for those that may not be familiar with the rural scene of central Nebraska. And so we started off looking at some western bean cutworm. We did find quite a bit of moths out there in our green bucket trap. And now we are investigating some beans to see if we can find any disease. That way Dylan doesn't just complain that we always only talk about corn, because we do. Me and Tamara, being close as advisor and student, we tend to get carried away talking about corn and our diseases. So I might have something here for Dylan. We'll see if he can see it based off my camera here. Dylan, we've got some. I'm just going to pull this leaf because I think it'll be easier.
Yeah, give us a stable close-up.
Can you see that?
I
Nah.
can see a little bit. Is that some necrosis?
Yeah.
Pattering?
Does that help?
Yeah, I can't tell for sure. Is that?
I'm thinking it's probably a little bit of bacterial blight
Yeah, it
occurring.
looks like the tattering associated with that.
So
Are those beans cupped at all?
yeah, there was a pretty sensitive spot right back here that they were cupping pretty decent.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They look a little yellow, a little chlorotic. How wide are those rows, Talon?
Chlorotic, little bit of I would say probably 30. Yep.
Yeah,
30 would be my guess.
They almost look like 36s. They look pretty wide.
Shoulder width apart.
Yeah.
My shoulders are maybe, I don't know. We can say that I have broad shoulders and they're 36 inches.
That's fair.
But probably not
Well,
quite. I think they're probably
okay.
30s.
They've got a ways to go before canopy closure. So I've seen beans that closed up 10 days ago. I'm sure did earlier.
Jeez.
These got a little ways.
Yeah.
But it looks like you've got a water out there.
Yes. So we got a pretty good rain last night, probably about close to half an inch. And we've got, this is an irrigated system, and I will say that system does look like it's moved since I was here yesterday setting up that green bucket trap. So I do think he probably irrigated yesterday because it was really hot this week. And I'm sure that those crops need maybe a little bit of water there with those upper mid 90-degree temperatures that we were seeing here kind of throughout this whole week. So let's see. I am still seeing a decent amount of Japanese beetles, but for the most part, that's kind of all I'm seeing. What are some things that we need to be looking for here this time of year dealing with soybeans?
Great question. Yeah, we've got, a couple critical periods coming up. That's going to be the flowering period. as we go into that, that's their susceptibility period to white mold. So if you're a grower who's never had white mold before, it's probably not going to show up in a meaningful way this year. So I wouldn't even worry about it. However, if you have fields with a strong history of white mold, it's probably going to show up again. Now, if we keep getting heat like we've had this last week in southern, southeast, south central Nebraska, um, it's probably not going to be as big of an issue. But up north, it's been a little bit cooler, especially at night. And, our northern Dixon site, I think, has had over 3 inches of rain in the past 7 days. There's more in the forecast. So that's going to help drive that if it's an issue. And historically, that region's had a lot more white mold. So those growers need to be aware of that. The first applications for that are typically somewhere in the first 10 days of July. Once you start to get flower on most or all plants is when you want to start thinking about a first application, or if you're just going to do one application, an early R2 type application. After that, you can think about other foliar fungi, but white mold is going to be the most impactful in this state. And
Dylan, I've always thought of, I mean, soybeans have so much foliage that for the most part, the things that are really going to hurt it are kind of those root rots, stem rots, those kinds of things later on in the season.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, there's so much foliage, and like you said, I mean, it covers the ground. Soybeans are really great at using almost 100% probably of that sunlight that comes into the canopy there later on in the season once we get full closure.
Yeah, that's why we need such high levels of defoliation from those insects to be meaningful on soybean. If you take the top leaf off, there's usually another leaf right below it that's ready to work. So foliar problems I don't worry about as much in soybean, but be aware about sudden death syndrome, things like that. Those are going to show up with strong foliar symptoms later on in the season as we get more heat. But they're root problems. So don't rush out with a fungicide or any foliar management for that. Just be aware of where that is and think about management, say with seed treatments in future years or variety specifically. So it's always important to know what you're working with, what disease you have, because management is always disease specific.
And so, Dylan, there's so many things out there that cause like interveinal chlorosis on soybeans. And one of the things that growers, I think, might start seeing this year, thinking they might get SDS, brown stem rot, any of those kinds of things, is a burn from a fungicide that may be getting applied here maybe in the next couple of weeks. What would that kind of look like?
That's a great comment. So a lot of our chemical control can cause the leaves to act differently. So we saw this cupping that happened on the leaves. That can be from a growth regulator herbicide that they put out there to control weeds. And it looks like that field has really good weed control. I've only seen a couple of them since you've been walking around. But that can impact the beans, not enough to become an issue, but it's important to get the weeds out of there. Another one is triazole fungicides can cause some level of toxicity on the soybean leaves, which might damage some of them and cause a symptom that looks strikingly similar to soybean sudden death syndrome. So two very different things causing that symptom. There's several other things that cause it as well, but that's again why it's important. I'd hate to see a fungicide cause that symptom and then someone respond by applying a fungicide to stop sudden death syndrome in future years. That's not going to solve that issue.
Yeah. What group is that triazole, Dylan?
Triazoles are the group 3s, right?
Yep, group 3.
Okay, good.
All right. Here's maybe a little bit more obvious one, Dylan. Got another leaf here. What do we think that looks like?
Blight there.
Yeah.
Bacterial blight, bacteria seem to get in there when there's a little bit of wounding. They're not going to spread in soybean and cause major issues, but if you get a wounding or some tattering of a leaf, it'll get in there and that leaf won't look as pretty for sure.
Yep. A lot of those bacterial diseases that we see, I do think tend to look really bad. Like bacterial leaf streak on corn can also look fairly severe. But Tamara, have we seen much for yield loss from bacterial leaf streak on corn?
Well, we don't think so. We don't have good data on that. We've struggled with, like a lot of our farmers have. We have to have, disease-free plots right next to a lot of disease. And the ones where I thought we might have seen some yield loss might have been some really severe examples where we had susceptible hybrids, like a few of the old popcorn hybrids. but in general, probably not, but it sure does look bad sometimes,
Yeah.
and it can look a lot like gray leaf spot too. It's important we know which one we're looking at.
Because in case anybody didn't know, fungicides do not control bacterial diseases. Make that clear.
That's right.
So, okay. I'm walking back through corn. Did we have any other comments, questions? I want to see if I can find something special out here. I've been looking in Dawson County for tar spot, but I cannot find it. I will be honest. I've looked. I got some potential reports from there being some up kind of around Sumner and Eddyville. I went up there and I wasn't able to find anything. That doesn't mean to say that it's not there. I just wasn't lucky that day, I guess, or something. But again, I will keep searching, and you can always check that crop lookout, or you can follow along with the hashtag ScoutNebraska social media platforms. We usually have posts about disease updates, what's going on where, what's being active in different fields. So I do recommend those resources. Okay.
Yep.
Good deal. Good deal. I think if everybody wants to keep an eye out, we are going to start hopefully a competition next week. And so you can get a potential beautiful hat that we have for Scout Nebraska now, and $200 for properly identifying a disease out in one of your cornfields. We're choosing a corn disease for July. And if you guys are properly able to identify and post a video of you identifying that disease, we'll be able to give you a little bit of cash. And so keep an eye out. We'll have more on that next week, and I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you guys can kind of get involved with scouting across Nebraska. So thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate those that came and joined the live today.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Yeah, we all appreciate it. If you'd like to follow along, we'll be doing these weekly at 11 a.m. every Friday. If you have recommendations for where to go or what to see, feel free to send them to us or post a photo or online and hashtag it with hashtag Scout Nebraska. Thanks everyone for coming out today.